I never thought the first crack would be a sentence tossed across a kitchen like a paper airplane. Saturday morning light on the sink, my hands in suds, her back against the counter, eyes on her phone. She didn't even aim it at me, just said to the room, "Must be nice not paying for anything around here." The faucet hissed. A mug slipped an inch in my grip. I waited for the punchline that never came. I'm the spreadsheet type. Not inflexible, just a man who knows that peace loves order. The mortgage auto drafts every first. The utilities sit on autopay in a tidy folder. Groceries, gas, a cushion for inevitable chaos, tires, dental, a sudden water heater that forgets how to be hot. We never argued about money because I kept us too far ahead of trouble to meet it face to face. So hearing that line, "must be nice not paying," felt like being told the sky is green. Either you question reality or you question the speaker. I did both, quietly, because that's how I'm built. She called it a girls' weekend, a reset before the big quarter-end push at work. She had a tote bag on the island stuffed with a curling iron, and a dress I'd never seen, and a corked bottle of rosé in a neoprene sleeve. Her friends were a text thread away, little gray bubbles tittering and filling and pausing like gossip that learned how to swim. She kissed my cheek like you pat a dog you still love but no longer take on road trips. I watched the Uber's taillight shrink down our street, then stood alone in a house that had been feeling like a rented stage set. When you work with systems, you learn two things: feelings are alarms, and alarms need logs. I opened my laptop. The browser remembered me even when my marriage didn't. Bank, card, secondary card. Old card I kept around like a spare key in case the sidewalk cracked. I had ignored it for months. The first line item that didn't make sense was small coffee chain across town. I hadn't been near in a year. The second was a boutique where the receipts are tiny and white and smell like bergamot. The third, a rideshare at 1:14 a.m. from a street I knew only from her friends' stories. Then Pages, Amazon, but not the kind of boring household orders that keep a life moving. These were bright, impulsive purchases that wanted an audience, ring lights, tripods, a silk robe, a wellness subscription that bills every 28 days because even scams know cycles. And then the clincher, an airline after dark. I've never been good at blinking at things I want to unsee. I scrolled through the email I used to catch all account notifications. There it sat like a pin in a map. I didn't know I'd be traveling. "Thank you for adding a new authorized user." The name on the line was hers. The timestamp dated back 3 months and 1 day. I rubbed my thumb over the trackpad until it felt hot. I didn't confront. People think confrontation is courage. Sometimes restraint is. I made a folder named Audit and started dragging in evidence like a man packing a suitcase he hopes he never has to open. Statements going back 6 months, screenshots of charges I could prove weren't mine. I cross-referenced with calendar entries and text threads and security camera pings from our porch, the small heartbeats of a house that notices who loves it. A pattern emerged. It always does, if you put the hours in. Purchases clustered around nights she called late rehearsals, even though she hasn't rehearsed anything but explanations in years. Charges bloomed at places where mirrors are sold as confidence. Uber rides landed at an address that Google Maps labeled with a little red pin and a name, the Beachmont Hotel. No business conferences in the sketch of the receipts, no loyalty points. Just the kind of weekend where you sign for drinks like you're making wishes into a fountain you believe in. Friday afternoon, while the workday murmured around me like a dismantled engine, I made calls. Banks prefer calm customers. Calm is how you get heard. I explained the authorized user that I never authorized. I used the right words, the ones systems understand: identity verification, unauthorized access, fraud department, dispute initiation, freeze. The representative on the line was named Maria and had a voice that suggested a clean kitchen table and a pen she trusts. She asked security questions no thief could guess and then read back everything I'd said like a transcript for a future courtroom. Within 20 minutes, 3 cards were frozen. Within an hour, the secondary account had a new number and the authorized user evaporated like steam. Next, the bureaus. People forget this step and then wonder how their lives keep getting open like mail. I hit the big three with freezes, turned down pre-approvals that show up like flattery, set alerts so loud they would be rude if courtesy had prevented theft. Email confirmations landed in my inbox like little shields. I forwarded them to my lawyer before I had one. A habit from work: if you think you might need a paper trail, start the paper. By 5, the locksmith's van parked in our driveway. He was a quiet man with careful hands and a patience you usually only see in watchmakers and pediatric nurses. He replaced the deadbolt in a way that kept the door looking the same from the street. People assume safety is a bigger lock. Often it's a better cylinder and a copy of the new key not given to the person who assumes they deserve one. I paid him extra to install a keypad on the back door, a temporary code that would expire Monday at noon. Mercy should have a timer. I packed, not the way TV teaches you, flinging clothes while cursing, snapping open drawers like you're angry at wood. I packed like an accountant, like an archivist of a life I was retiring. Dresses into wardrobe boxes with a breath of tissue paper because decency costs nothing and regret gets you nothing back. Shoes in pairs, the ones I bought and the ones I warned her not to because the return policy was a trap. Cosmetics into the travel case she loved, the one she called her go bag like she was a spy. I labeled each box with neutral words: closet left, closet right, vanity, desk. I put aside anything irreplaceable: family photographs, the ceramic bowl her grandmother threw, the lasagna pan that had fed 20 when life still felt like a potluck. She could have those, but not now, not this weekend. It sounds cold. It was. Cold kept me from doing the kind of hot things you spend years apologizing for. The dog came next, and I say dog even though the adoption happened later because Gus existed in the house as a possibility that night. I had wanted a dog since before the kitchen comment, had Googled mixes that wouldn't upset her allergies, had bookmarked rescue pages and closed them again because love looks like compromise until it looks like erasure. With the locks changed and the boxes stacked and the house temporarily quiet, I opened my laptop to a shelter's website and clicked apply on a photo of a yellow mutt with a face like he'd failed a math test and still wants to please the teacher. I wrote, stable home, fenced yard, someone here most nights. Under, why do you want this animal? I typed, because loyalty is the only currency I recognize. Night fell. The town outside went soft around the edges, the way suburbs do when the day has worn itself out and kids are in bathtubs and televisions are competing with crickets. At 9:15, my phone buzzed with an alert I had configured while Maria looked up my account numbers. Attempted charge declined. It spelled the restaurant's name in cheerful font. I saw the dish I knew she'd order because she always orders the thing with truffle oil when she isn't paying. Imagine the table. A cluster of women, skin lit by indirect lighting, a server hovering with a smile that knows social choreography. Imagine my wife then, sliding a card across and telling a story that makes her friends look at her the way family looks at a bride about to be walked down an aisle a second time. Imagine the server returning and keeping his voice low. I'm sorry, it's not going through. It is petty to admit the satisfaction of picturing that moment. It is also honest. 10 minutes later, another alert, rideshare declined. Then a hotel authorization rejected. Declined, declined, declined. A drumbeat. I don't know who offered to pick up the tab first. I do know the word emergency appears in text threads a lot when the bill arrives and someone is out of credit. A storm of messages hit my phone across channels like rain coming through a roof. At first, she played it confused. Hey, is your card acting weird? Then she got clinical. The bank must have flagged it. Can you call them? Then she swiveled to guilt. You know I wouldn't put you in a bad position on purpose. Then she reached for menace. If you're doing this to prove a point, it's cruel. Then she reached for love like a last stare on a spiral that has already run out. Baby, I'm stranded. I didn't answer. Silence is only cruel if you've promised sound. Around midnight, a number I didn't recognize rang through with the sleepy insistence of old phones. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from the hotel desk, a man whose voice was 4 parts trained courtesy, 1 part boredom, 1 part stress. He said my wife was unable to check in because of a payment issue and that if I could provide a card on file, they would be happy to accommodate. The nonchalance with which he asked me to pay for the room where she would meet a man whose name I'd already found in her Venmo history made me marvel at how effortless enabling can be when it wears a uniform. I texted our neighbor instead, Mrs. Patterson, widow, 82, the kind of person who still knows how to make cobbler without looking at a recipe. She has a view of our driveway and a memory that holds the block's story in neat bundles, and she uses both only for kindness. She had watched my boxes stack like a skyline through her lace curtains and pretended not to notice because she respects people's tidy lies. I wrote, if she calls you, tell her what we talked about, boundaries, consequences. The text bubble showed delivered. The porch light across the street flicked on, then off. Message received. At 2, a longer text came in, one of those paragraphs that arrive when someone types what should be a letter into a tiny rectangle. She said I had humiliated her. She said I was overreacting. She said these were just cards and she was my wife, and that's what wives do when husbands keep things tight. She wrote, maybe if you were more generous, we wouldn't have problems. I closed my eyes and saw a bank of monitors in a dark room and a single red light blinking while everyone on duty decided whether to take it personally. Morning brought a steadier kind of anger, the kind that makes lists. I called a lawyer. Her name is Janelle. I found her because her website didn't have a photo of a gavel or a scale, and because she doesn't use the word aggressive like it's perfume. She speaks in complete sentences and saves adjectives for when she needs them. I laid out the audit. Janelle asked questions in a rhythm that soothed my brain into order. She told me what to say to whom and when, send a text stating facts, offer a path that avoids cops and courts, document every reply, screenshot timestamps and devices. She told me we weren't punishing, we were establishing. I wrote the text in notes first. Unauthorized use of my accounts has been reported. Your access has been revoked. Your belongings are boxed. You can collect them Sunday between 10 and 2. A storage unit will be available after if needed. Address attached. I will not press charges if you return the cards and do not attempt to access any account again. If you refuse, I will. The word will does work when a person expects maybe. I sent it to her and placed my phone face down on the table because if you can't walk away from the reply, you're still too close to the thing that hurt you. When she finally answered, the text arrived as screenshots of a letter on a boutique firm's letterhead. Spousal rights, it said. Community property. Mismanagement of marital assets and abuse of access. I forwarded the images to Janelle and made coffee. My hands didn't shake. My legs did, a little, like they wanted to run but had nowhere to go. Janelle's reply came within the hour. A PDF with a tone without being rude. My client has documented unauthorized additions of an authorized user to personal accounts. He has documented charges inconsistent with marital purpose. We are prepared to provide to law enforcement if necessary. We are, however, interested in an expedient dissolution with a fair division of assets and a mutual non-harassment agreement. If your client attempts further access, we will pursue criminal charges. I sent the email exactly as she wrote it. The phone was so quiet afterward, I could hear the refrigerator's ancient fan exhale. She showed up Sunday at 10:02 looking smaller than she ever had and madder about it than she would admit. She wore sunglasses she didn't need indoors and a hoodie with a college name she never attended, and she held herself like a person who expects pity-like change from a cashier. I opened the door and nodded toward the boxes. We did not hug. She tried to breezily step past me like this was a sitcom where we banter while packing. The new deadbolt against the strike plate made a noise that clarified the world for both of us. I said, "You can use the hall bathroom." She blinked. She says, "Well, you don't have to be dramatic." I said, "I'm being precise." Precision is not cruelty, confusion is. We moved carefully around each other while she packed her car, pretending our grief wasn't only a few inches tall and standing on the counter watching with round eyes. In the box labeled Vanity, she found the jewelry tray I'd bought the week after her promotion and stared at it like it was a photograph from a better climate. She pocketed a single ring and left the tray. I took that as a sign not of decency, but of exhaustion. Exhausted people look like redeemed ones if you don't squint. I refused to squint. She asked then, a small voice wrapped in gauze, "Is there someone else?" I could have lied. It is tempting to hurt by inventing a replacement. I said, "There is me." She made a face like she had bitten into a lemon she had been told was an orange. "You always loved yourself best," she said, a low blow cast as insight. I let it land and pass through me like weather. The last box fit in the trunk with a sound like a cork being forced back into a bottle. Before she closed it, she turned and softened her mouth and asked, "Are you going to do this to me?" Meaning police, court, the whole machine. I said, "That depends on whether you try to access anything that belongs to me again. Call your bank, return the cards. That's your path." She nodded like a student who hates the teacher but likes the grade. After she left, the house felt heavier and cleaner. Grief doesn't always feel like water. Sometimes it's dust you can finally see because the light changed. I opened windows. I changed pillowcases. I took the trash out and didn't invent crimes for the garbage to confess to on the walk to the bin. Then I drove to the shelter and met Gus. He barreled at me with the confidence of a toddler in a cape and stopped right at my knee like he'd learned brakes. The volunteer said, "He's good at loving, still learning about not stealing socks." I said, "Same." I filled out forms that asked more questions than our mortgage application had. Do you understand that pets are forever? Do you understand that forever means this animal's forever not yours? I initialed every line like I was swearing an oath because I was. The first night, Gus snored like a modest motorcycle. I lay there and listened to a creature breathe who expected nothing of me beyond patience and dinner and walks that end where they began. The house, newly keyed and newly quiet, finally felt like a place humans were meant to survive. If the story ended here, it would be neat enough to fit in a video short. But real endings are messy. They keep returning to ask if you've learned anything useful. On Tuesday, a courier delivered a thicker letter from the boutique firm. Their client, my wife, desired to resolve matters amicably but felt humiliated by my financial stunt and intended to seek damages for emotional distress. They recommended a settlement figure that made the coffee in my mouth taste metallic. Janelle called before I could choke. "It's theater," she said. "They're saying words to see what echoes. We will respond with facts." Her response began with spreadsheets and ended with statute. She attached the fraud alerts, the time-stamped authorized user email, the credit bureau freezes, and the screenshots of her attempts to charge dinner, a ride, and a hotel during the window my accounts were frozen. "We will not negotiate with a demand premised on the existence of acts that did not occur," Janelle wrote. "My client did not embarrass yours. Physics did. Cards decline when funds are not available or access is revoked due to fraud." The tone changed. It always does when someone realizes you can prove the thing they plan to deny. That night, I received a text from a number that had once been a group chat for couples dinners. He's one of those men whose shirts remember the gym better than he does. He wrote, "Dude, you didn't have to do her like that. We could have talked." I wrote back, "I didn't do her like anything. I secured my accounts." He replied, "You always were controlling." Then he added the kind of thought people have when they can't bear to be implicated by the truth. "Maybe if you'd been more fun, this wouldn't have happened." I typed and deleted. Then I blocked him and put my phone face down again. The next day, a friend of hers, someone I once loved like a cousin who shows up with casseroles and opinions, called and left a message thick with concern. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Money isn't everything. What happened to compassion?" I played the message for Janelle. She said, "They will call you selfish for refusing to fund your own depletion. People who benefited from boundaries not being enforced always call the fence cruel." My mother, who lives 3 states away and treats worry like it's a competitive sport, asked if she should come stay. I told her no because I was trying out being the superhero of my own small movie. But I let her mail me a quilt anyway, and when I spread it on the bed and smelled the detergent she's used since I was a kid, I cried so quietly even Gus didn't lift his head. I wish I could say I never wavered. I did. On Thursday, she sent a text that just said, please. I called Janelle. She said, you can be kind without being foolish. What does kindness look like here? I said, a storage unit paid 3 months in advance and the lasagna pan in her trunk. Janelle said, then do that and nothing else. So I did. I rented a unit near her sister's place because her sister had a minivan and a stubborn belief in redemption. I paid the first quarter and left the lock code in a text that did not ask if she was sleeping or eating. I put the pan on the front seat of her car with a post-it that said, you fed people from this. Keep doing that part. Then I closed the door and stood on the porch and let the air move around my face until I could walk back into the house without narrating it like a court filing. Her lawyer quieted. Quiet is not the same as surrender, but it's the first time you can hear yourself think. We filed for divorce. We divided in the least poetic ways. This couch, that chair, the retirement account split with a QDRO and a shrug, the plates down the middle like a bad magic trick. No alimony, no argument from her side after Janelle included an exhibit marked C showing the aggregate of her unauthorized charges. A month later, an email arrived from the airline about miles earned for a trip I didn't take. I called and asked that they remove my name from the reservation's history. The representative said she couldn't change the past, only the account going forward. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was beautiful and how unhelpful and true it was. On a day the sky felt like a bruise healing, I ran into someone who used to be our friend together, the kind who posts boomerangs of champagne clinks and writes things under them like Chase and Joy. She cornered me by the produce section and whispered as if money could hear, she says you froze her card on purpose to strand her. I said I froze my card to keep my money from being stolen. It's not my fault where she was standing when the ice formed. The woman looked relieved like I'd given her a line she could quote without getting unfollowed. Meanwhile, Gus learned sit, badly learned stay, and mastered down only when treats were involved. He loved every person we met as if they had written him a letter of recommendation and then delivered it by hand. He slept on the floor next to the couch even though I bought him a bed because loyalty is not always logical. Work noticed I had become both quieter and more ruthless in meetings. Our PM asked if I was okay. I said yes, and also that the word okay did a lot of heavy lifting in corporate life. I found myself telling junior engineers that boundaries make uptime, and they nodded like I had said something in a language they were learning. My boss, a gentle cynic named Priya who teaches her kids to code by making them automate chores, said file all your receipts and don't waste time on enemies. It was the best managerial advice I've ever received. A minor twist, her mother called, not to plead, to apologize. She said, when I was your wife's age, I did exactly what she did. I thought the world owed me things I hadn't earned and stole from the person who loved me most because the bill never comes if you hand it to the person at your table. I sat on my back steps and listened to a woman take responsibility for sins that skipped a generation. I told her I didn't hate her daughter. Hate is a hobby. I'm busy. Another twist, a letter from a collection agency connected to a store card I'd never seen. She had opened it using a variation of our address and my initials and a different birthday by one digit. I added the letter to the audit folder and called Maria again. She clicked keys that sounded like someone sweeping a tile floor and said, you've done everything right. I'll add a notation and a block. I thanked her in a tone that made her laugh, and she said, try to have a good weekend, the kind of benediction you want to put in a frame. On a Sunday when the clouds finally remember how to be generous, I drove out to a lake that sits behind a retired factory and threw a ball for Gus until his tongue looked like it needed its own leash. A man about my age sat 3 benches down, watching his kid learn to ride a bike on grass because pavement is honest in a way grass is not. The kid tipped, the man didn't rush, the kid righted himself, and the man clapped once. I felt my chest go soft in a place that had been hard a long time and thought, so this is how you begin again, not with fireworks, but with small applause you give to other people's victories. Then the call I expected but still dreaded, a detective from the financial crimes unit asking if I intended to press charges. My dispute with the card company had tripped the threshold, and sometimes thresholds trigger humans. He used words like complainant and alleged and spouse in a way that made me feel both protected and exposed. I asked for time. Janelle said, this is your lever and your lesson. What do you want to build with it? I said, a clean exit and a little fear in her that makes her never do this to the next person. Janelle said, then write a letter and we'll hold it like a match we promise not to strike. We drafted a statement and filed it under if. The detective understood. Good cops love clarity the way I love a reconciled spreadsheet. I sent my ex-wife funny how easily that prefix attaches when you stop feeding the present, a final message that read like a guide rail. Return any card in your possession. Cease attempts to access accounts. Confirm closure of the store card. If all conditions are met, I will not proceed with criminal complaint. She replied within the hour, done. The relief that arrived wasn't joy. It was the absence of dread, which if you've lived with enough of it, feels like a prize. Months turned. The grass in the yard went from evenly arrogant to patchy humble to dog-loved. I swapped bulbs in the hallway for lower wattage because my house had been too bright for too long. I went to therapy even though I thought I was fine because fine is a word people use to drive past the address where help lives. The therapist asked me what the kitchen sentence meant. I told her it meant I was invisible. She asked if I'd been hiding. I said yes, for years behind competence. She said, competence is a lovely mask until it suffocates you. We talked about control and mercy and how both can be confused with each other when you're raised to believe love is a job. On a Tuesday that smelled like rain and old paper, the shelter sent a holiday card. Inside was a photo of Gus in a scarf he hated, and under it, a note from the volunteer who'd introduced us. Thank you for being the person he thinks you are. I put the card on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear and considered that maybe that sentence is every good man's goal. I saw her once after the paperwork became a decree. Grocery store, near the place where they stack the good bread too high to reach without grabbing the plastic. She looked tired in the way people look when they are living without momentum. She smiled the tired smile of someone who knows they owe you something you cannot cash. She said, "You look well." I said, "I am." We were polite to the bread and to each other. She left with a single baguette. I left with two and a jar of olives because lonely and alone are different species, and I was finally living with the better one. Later, a package without a return address arrived. Inside, our wedding album and a note that said, "I took pictures of the ones I wanted. Keep the rest." I put the album on a shelf I don't visit and decided that memory isn't dangerous unless you lie to it. A final letter from the boutique firm arrived months later. Thin and sheepish, their client had completed all conditions and requested written confirmation that I would not pursue charges. Janelle sent a single sentence, "We confirm." I signed digitally and closed the audit folder for the first time without my hand shaking. Here is what I learned the way people learn after the test. Money is a language. If someone uses it to say, "I don't see you," believe them. If someone treats your labor like a river they have rights to drink from without asking, build a dam. People will call the dam cruel and the river generous because they're standing downstream. It is not your job to explain hydrology to anyone who benefits from the flood. Here's what else I learned. Respect is romantic. More than flowers, more than surprise weekends in cities that look good in photographs, more than big posts with big captions. Respect is paying attention to the contract. Two people write in little daily ways. Wash your dish. Say please and thank you, even if you think contracts don't need manners. Ask before adding your name to anything that has numbers on it. Tell the truth when you want something you can't afford. Don't steal because you're mad the world didn't hand you a shortcut. If you've read this far, you want the answer that fits on a mug. I don't have one. I have this instead. When the bank froze my accounts, it thawed me. The house is quieter now. The couch is still ugly but honest. The dog forgives quicker than I do, which keeps me humble. My therapist says I can love again if I promise not to hire myself as the manager of the relationship. My mother's quilt keeps the kind of warm that doesn't brag. I run without earbuds so I can hear my feet. Some alarms still go off. I listen now. At the end of one long day, the kind that felt like a pan cooling on a stove after you finally turn off the burner, I sat on the porch with Gus leaning against my knee and watched the neighbor kid chalk a crooked hopscotch that made a rule of skipping the number 4. His mother didn't correct him. He laughed as if the game belonged to him, and maybe it did. I thought, that's what a boundary is at its best. A rule you choose because it keeps you moving without falling. This is the part where a video begs for interaction. I'm not above that. It helps the algorithm and it helps the next person who needs to hear a story like this find it. But I mean the question, would you have kept it private and swallowed the resentment until it congealed into cynicism? Or would you have done what I did, gathered receipts, shut the gates, and let the decline speak louder than any speech you could deliver? Where's your line? When do you say enough and make the room respect you even if it means you eat dinner alone for a while? Tell me. Tell the next person. Sometimes the map you draw out of your own mess is the one someone else finds under their doormat the night they finally change the locks. She once told me I was cruel. Maybe. Maybe mercy looks cruel to people who never learned the difference between a gift and theft. I didn't prosecute. I didn't publish screenshots. I didn't stand outside the hotel with a sign. I engineered a moment where truth could not be swiped away, and then I walked back into my quiet house and taught a dog to sit badly and made an omelet that did not stick. Sometimes justice is just choosing the kinder future and guarding its door. What would you do? Comment your line in the sand, like if you're on my side. Subscribe if you want more of these long, messy, true-to-life stories. I'm here, and so is Gus, and so is the quiet you get when you stop letting other people spend you like a card they never earned.